Imagine, just for a second, that you're standing under the glaring, intense lights of a global championship arena. You're wearing a heavy, pinstriped suit, and you're absolutely sweating profusely. You've only been practicing for 5 months, right? Yet here you are about to compete against literal world champions. And the crazy part? The only reason you're standing there, thousands of miles away from home, is because you finally decided to pull the plug and quit your soul-crushing 80-hour-a-week corporate job. Well, welcome to our explainer of Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek. If you've ever stared down your alarm clock in the morning with just a creeping sense of dread, or if you've caught yourself wondering if this standard 9-to-5 grind is literally all there is to life, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get into it. The entire core promise we're looking at today is a radical, almost unbelievable blueprint for escaping that daily grind and completely taking your life back. Because think about what the average career path looks like for most of us right now. It's that numbing morning commute sitting in gridlock traffic. It's the overflowing email inbox that literally never ever empties. It's penny pinching, sacrificing the absolute best years of your physical youth, and just crossing your fingers that you'll have a little bit of energy left to enjoy life during a retirement that's, 40 or 50 years from now? What we are breaking down today is a total lifestyle design shift. It's a philosophy thousands have used to completely flip the script on how they work, where they live, and how they spend their most precious, totally non-renewable resource, time. So to really grasp how radical this shift is, let's step fully back into that championship arena I mentioned. We're dropping right into the action in Buenos Aires at the semifinals of the Tango World Championship. Picture an overworked, totally burned out office worker named Tim Ferriss. He's sweating through that pinstripe suit on the hardwood floor, staring out at this thick, intimidating haze of cigarette smoke and a massive, fierce crowd of 50,000 spectators. The music starts swelling, the heat in the room is just suffocating, and his veteran dance partner leans in and whispers,
Tranquilo, take it easy.
In that exact adrenaline-fueled moment, about to compete on a global stage after just 5 months of practice, Ferriss asks himself a really profound question. What on earth would he be doing right now if he hadn't taken the massive leap to quit his miserable job a year prior? That single question highlights the fundamental divide between two very different groups of people. First, you have what we'll call the deferrers. This is your standard 40-year corporate slog. Deferrers put their happiness on hold, right? They save all their actual living for a retirement that honestly may never even come, risking severe physical burnout and emotional exhaustion along the way. Now, contrast that deeply with the new rich. The new rich just completely reject that deferred life plan. Instead, they use concepts like geographic arbitrage, extreme time management, and complete mobility to create luxury lifestyles right now in the present. See, the new rich understand a crucial secret. People don't actually want $1 million sitting in a bank account. What they want is to experience the lifestyle of complete freedom that they assume millions of dollars can buy. For this group, the ultimate currency isn't money at all. It's the total, unrestricted freedom of time and location. To get there, we follow the DEAL framework. Step 1 is define, which is all about conquering your fears. Building this kind of lifestyle starts with definition. This means completely replacing your assumptions and changing the rules of the game. And a huge, vital part of that is conquering the paralyzing fear of the unknown. Now, there's some really profound wisdom on this from the Stoic philosopher Seneca. He actually advised us to physically practice living in the exact condition we fear the absolute most. So if you're terrified of going broke, Seneca would say, okay, spend a week eating only the cheapest rice and beans, wear your roughest clothes, and sleep on the hard floor. By physically rehearsing your absolute worst-case scenario, you quickly realize it's actually incredibly survivable. The fear of the unknown that we build up in our heads is almost always 1,000 times worse than the actual grounded reality of failure. Which brings us to a really powerful question you have to ask yourself, especially if you're sitting there feeling paralyzed by inaction or maybe feeling trapped in a corporate cubicle. What is the absolute worst thing that could happen if you did the exact opposite of everyone around you? For so many people, it's just the fear of losing a steady paycheck that keeps them anchored to a life of sheer misery. They imagine absolute, unrecoverable ruin. But once you actually define that fear, like once you sit down and write out exactly what steps you would take to recover if everything went totally wrong, you completely strip away its power over you. Take the incredibly vivid story of Hans Keeling. For nearly 5 years, Hans worked as this high-powered attorney in Los Angeles' ultra-posh Century City. On paper, the guy was highly successful. But in reality, he faced his alarm clock with just absolute dread every single morning. He often slept under his desk in his business suit, constantly wondering if he was doomed to repeat this exact nightmare for another 40 years. For Hans, the breaking point The moment he finally made the calculation to escape came when he was staring down a terrifying 3,000-foot drop while paragliding in Brazil. As the thermal updraft caught his chute and he's suddenly soaring above the coastline, a massive psychological shift happened. He realized that taking risks wasn't actually that scary once you were finally up in the air. The real danger, he realized, was staying perfectly safe on the ground, doing absolutely nothing. He flew back home on a Monday and promptly quit his job so he could stop living like a zombie. Redefining the rules of the game is exactly what Tim Ferriss himself did when he won the Chinese Kickboxing National Championship back in 1999. Get this, he had only 4 weeks of preparation. 4 weeks! He didn't win by being the strongest or the fastest or even the most skilled fighter in the room. He won by working way smarter and exploiting 2 simple, perfectly legal loopholes in the official rules. First, he used extreme dehydration techniques, literally sweating out all his water weight to weigh in at exactly 165 pounds, just before hyperhydrating back up to his natural 193 pounds right by fight time. This meant he was stepping into the ring against much, much smaller opponents. Second, he read the rulebook incredibly closely and found a quirky rule. If a fighter falls off the elevated fighting platform 3 times in a single round, the opponent wins by default. So rather than throwing a bunch of technical punches, he literally just shoved his smaller opponents off the stage. He entirely redefined the rules of engagement, and that is exactly how the new rich approach life and business. Moving right along to step 2, eliminate. And this is all built on the 80-20 principle. Elimination completely destroys this obsolete, old-school illusion of time management. Because let's be honest, being busy is very often just a clever disguise for avoiding the few critically important but maybe uncomfortable actions in our work and life. To cut through all that noise, you only need to remember one ratio, 80-20. This represents the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto's law, which dictates that roughly 80% of your results come from just 20% of your efforts. Think about it in your own everyday life. It is highly, highly likely that 80% of your stress comes from just 20% of your emails. And conversely, 80% of your true joy probably comes from just 20% of your closest friends. It applies to almost everything. So I really want you to ask yourself this exact question. Ferriss applied this ruthlessly to his own life back when he was running a sports nutrition business. He was grinding out 80-hour weeks, fielding nonstop complaints, and honestly, just absolutely hating his life. By applying the 80-20 principle, he took a hard look at his client base and did the unthinkable. He fired 112 of his 120 wholesale customers. Crazy, right? But he realized those 112 were the exact ones causing all the massive headaches, the endless phone calls, and bringing in those tiny unprofitable orders. He dropped them and focused solely on his top 8 whale clients. And the result? His weekly hours instantly plummeted from over 80 hours a week down to roughly 15, and his monthly income literally doubled from $30,000 to $60,000. Elimination is all about maximizing your output by drastically, ruthlessly reducing your input. That brings us to the third pillar. Automate. This is all about outsourcing your life. Automation is about capitalizing on geographic arbitrage and putting your cash flow and your systems on absolute autopilot. Now, Esquire editor A.J. Jacobs took this concept to a hilarious, almost unbelievable extreme. Inspired by the whole concept of offshore tech support, Jacobs actually decided to outsource his entire personal life to a remote assistant team over in Bangalore, India. And I mean, he had them handle everything imaginable. He paid them to read his books for him and send them summaries. He had them research complex topics. He even had them deal with annoying customer service calls regarding his son's broken toys. And in what is definitely the most absurd limit of automation, he literally had his overseas team sending apology emails to his wife after they had a marital argument. No joke. Now, obviously, Jacob's experiment was heavily comedic, but this quote from Thoreau perfectly captures the real underlying goal here. True wealth is found in offloading the mundane, repetitive aspects of our lives. Look, you absolutely do not have to outsource your apologies to your spouse, but you can start automating the small things right now, today. Think about meal prep or calendar scheduling or just setting up basic email autoresponders. By actively removing yourself from the day-to-day minutia through careful delegation and automation, you stop being the bottleneck in your own life, and you finally free up your most valuable asset, your time. Our fourth and final structural step is liberate, which is basically the ultimate mobile manifesto. Liberation is about creating the ultimate freedom to live and work from absolutely anywhere. It introduces this brilliant concept of mini retirements, basically distributing months of travel and passion projects throughout your entire active life, rather than hoarding them all up for old age. Now, a lot of people assume that having a family makes this kind of liberation completely impossible. But a woman named Julie and her husband proved that totally wrong. They realized that the magical, perfect time to travel was never, ever going to arrive. So they took a massive leap of faith and took their 3 young boys on a 15-month, 15,000-mile sailboat journey all the way around the world, from Venice to Polynesia. And the transformation was incredible. These kids, who used to fight constantly in their sprawling suburban house, learned deep patience in a tiny floating bedroom and swapped out their hyperactive habits for just a quiet love of reading books. Now, we have to break down the math here because most people automatically assume a trip like that requires millions of dollars sitting in the bank. The reality is actually quite different. Because they engaged in financial arbitrage, meaning they bought the sailboat at the start of the trip, lived on it, and then sold it right at the end to recoup their initial investment, the net cost of this entire 15-month global adventure was stunningly low. It cost them less than $19,000. Think about that. That was actually significantly cheaper than staying home, buying groceries, and paying their standard rent in Paris. Freedom is incredibly cheap if you just untether yourself from standard consumer habits and those strict geographic limitations.
Step 5. The Fisherman Fable. Let's redefine success.
To tie all these incredible concepts together, there's a famous fable that just perfectly encapsulates this entire philosophy. An American Harvard MBA who is frantic and totally stressed out is vacationing in a small coastal village when he meets this really content Mexican fisherman. The MBA immediately advises the fisherman to scale his tiny, peaceful operation. He excitedly pitches this massive corporate slog: catch more fish, buy a fleet of boats, open a cannery, move to Los Angeles, and run a stressful global enterprise. The fisherman calmly listens and asks, "Well, how long will all this take?" The MBA says, "Oh, about 25 years. "And then what?" the fisherman asks. The MBA throws his hands up enthusiastically and says, "That's the best part. Then you can IPO, make millions, and retire to a small coastal village to sleep late, fish a little, and play with your kids." The fisherman just smiles, realizing the MBA is literally telling him to spend 25 years in total misery just to achieve exactly what he is already doing right now. This fable strikes right at the very heart of the new rich philosophy. Having $1 million in the bank is almost never the actual goal for us. The true fantasy is the lifestyle of complete autonomy that we think $1 million will allow us to have. The profound realization of this explainer is that you don't need to shortcut your way to $1 million. You can just shortcut your way directly to the lifestyle. You do not need to work yourself to the bone for 40 years to finally achieve freedom. You can architect it right now, today.
So, if you are currently grinding away at a miserable job solely for some vague, far-off future payoff, you really have to ask yourself about the sunk cost fallacy. Imagine going to a nice restaurant and paying $8 for a slice of cheesecake. You take one bite and it is entirely dry, bitter, and just awful. But you force yourself to sit there and eat the entire thing, chewing through the absolute misery simply because you ordered it and you paid for it. We do this with our careers all the time. We stick out bad decisions, sinking 8 or 10 of our best years into a miserable career just because we invested time into a college degree for it. We force ourselves to eat the awful cheesecake.
I'll leave you with this final, truly provocative thought to ponder today. Take a close look at how you spend your days and look honestly at the current trajectory of your life. Are you going to keep living as a deferrer, just waiting around for a someday that might never even arrive to finally start enjoying your existence? Or are you ready to conquer your fears, eliminate the noise, automate your income, and actually design your life today?